better continue with him. He came back from overseas then, and being a musician, like I told you, he played in the Cave Dine and Dance Club in downtown Toronto. He was the drummer. He could twist the drumsticks and play away, and when they were playing for the bit dance, every once in a while he'd flip one up in the air, and he'd flip the other one up in the air and grab this one and grab that one and keep on playing. He was a very talented drummer. So he played the drums at the nightclub at that nightclub, and then in '45, when the war ended, so my dad decided, well, we better buy the hotel downtown. That's when it was 3 stories high and a beverage room business, only 2 places in town where you could buy a drink, of any kind, whether it was a beer or a hard liquor. It was that one and a lot smaller hotel on 2nd Avenue, Mike Jaskew's place. So in those days it was a thriving business, and I think the way Lane runs it today, I think it likely still thriving. But anyway, he bought the hotel. He didn't buy it. We formed a company. My mother and dad, and what the 3 boys' savings. While they were in our services, they didn't draw very big wages, but they would save so much, and I didn't have to go into the services because I was too young. But I had $1,000, so we all put our money together. We all put our money together and formed the Manitou Hotel Company Limited, and bought the hotel. So we ran it for 24 years, and in the meantime, my oldest brother, Bill, he, besides being a good musician, he had quite a few talents. He decided, well, he could be a plumber. And he decided, doggone it, there was only one steady plumber in town, and people used to get the plumber from Saskatoon for jobs most of the time, or half the time anyway. And for what those companies were charging from Saskatoon and the plumber in Watrous, my brother Billy decided, well, he could charge half the price that they were charging and still make a living at it. So he went into the plumbing business and worked at the hotel sometimes at night. If they didn't have too busy a day, he'd come down and help us at night. Otherwise, he would just carry on his own business. And then he, besides being the plumber and a musician, he also did other buildings, like not just plumbing in houses, but he would buy houses and just fix them up. Not new houses, but old fixer-uppers. And he did a lot of that right up until 1970, and he died quite suddenly. He was sick at home one night and phoned the doctor across the road. And that's when doctors still did house calls in 1950. I guess this was actually 1970, and told the doctor, his wife told the doctor, well, he's got pains in the chest, and well, the doctor said, just take a couple of aspirins and go to bed. It's just heartburn or something. It doesn't sound very serious. Well, about 4 in the morning, he passed away. So that was just in 1950. He was only 49 years old. And so then my brother, and he was married just the same month that we bought the hotel. Once had bought the hotel, he went down to Winnipeg to the girl he was engaged to, and they got married in Winnipeg and moved back to Watrous. And they she was Ardell Anderson, who had been living in Winnipeg, and she'd come into Winnipeg from down near the border, Sage, right near the border was her hometown, but she'd come to Winnipeg to take a hairdressing course and then had a hairdressing job in Winnipeg, and that's when my brother met her, and they got married and came back to Watrous to the hotel here. And my brother Jack, he was went right into the Air Force too, RCAF. As soon as he finished school, and that was only past grade 11, because he was only 17 years old when he went into the Royal Canadian Air Force. Went in young, and he was because he went in so young at the beginning of the war. He was sent overseas and stayed straight in England and France. He landed in France the day after June the 6th, when they had the invasion, the big invasion of northern France there at Normandy.
Oh, was that Dunkirk?
So he was there on the 7th of June.
Oh, that was Dunkirk?
And then he came back over to England for a leave, and they said that was the beginning of his debarkation leave. So that meant he had put in his 4 years, so they sent him home. And he was to have, I think it was 20 days leave at home, or it was something like that anyway. It was a lot of time. Maybe he was to have 4 weeks. But anyway, it was during that 4 weeks that the war ended, and he didn't have to go back to England. And that was, that he married a girl. Oh, she came here from Burke. She'd had her teaching degree, and she taught at a couple of other towns, and then she came here to Watrous, and her hometown was Burke, Saskatchewan, and that's who Jack married. And that was a little bit later than 1945. That was, as a matter of fact, that was 62, because he'd gone into the Air Force very young age. And anyway, he worked steady at the hotel. He didn't go into any bands or anything. He played in the local band, mind you. Always was at the band whenever there was any sort of or any size of local Watrous citizens band. Jack was always there, playing either a horn or the drum. And my brother Bill was always there, because he's the one that I was telling you was a very good musician. And my father was always there, playing the bass drum. And anyway, they all were good musicians. And besides playing in the band, what Jack did is regular things like curling and steady Legion person and Kinsman member when he was younger, and Order of the Eastern Star, and Odd Fellows, Order of the Odd Fellows Association, and worked a full-time job at the hotel. Did quite a bit of curling. That was his favorite sport. And my dad had been a good curler, and Bill was a good curler.
And did you work at the hotel?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. People knew that I'd worked there several years, And people would say to me sometimes, "Don't you miss the hotel?" Or just ask, "Do you miss the hotel?" Or they'd say, "I bet you're glad to be out of the hotel business." And I'd say, "You're just nuts." Because I said, I've never been happy since I left the hotel business. That's right up until today.
And
I love the hotel business.
and what did you enjoy about the hotel business?
What did I enjoy about it?
Yeah.
What I enjoyed most was I could just drink a glass of beer whenever I wanted it, from breakfast time until midnight, and not even have to pay for it. Not even 5 cents. That's what I enjoyed most.
And second most?
And I just meeting new people, you know, you meet the new people that come to town, whether they come to town just to look the town over or come over and just wondering if they want to move to Watrous if they haven't settled in some other town yet. And you meet them, and if they decide to settle, then they come into town. You know, you've seen them downtown shopping and so on. And so you get to know them early. You get to know them early, and I'm talking about everybody that came to town, whether they just come in to see who drank beer or who didn't drink beer, or whether they came in for a beer themselves, or just to see who they might like to hang out with and learn about. And you look at these people and you talk to them. That's if you're not as shy as I am. Then you talk to them and get to know them, and people would tell me, "This seems to be a friendly town," and I'd say, "Yeah, it definitely is a friendly town." And I would talk to those type of people, and those were the days when I don't know if times have changed, or people have changed, or if Watrous has changed, because that does not happen anymore. I've met people on Main Street who I know have lived here for 10 years, and I haven't got a clue what their name is or when they moved to town. I just know that I see them once or twice a year, and maybe they don't like the looks of me because I wear a big boot because I got a sore leg or foot or something. But it has come to my attention to the point where I have not said this to people before, but I've had the feeling that I know that this used to be a good town to move to. I know it because from meeting them, right from when they're new in Watrous, right till they only drop into the hotel once a year, we still remembered who we were. But during the last 10 years, I doubt if I have met 15 new people in total in 10 years.
Mm.
So I'm starting to wonder, is this town turning out to be a not friendly town? It makes me wonder. I have that feeling anyway. Maybe I'm the only one that thinks that way. And just maybe it's because when I was in business and in the hotel business, maybe I was just in the business that I just had that opportunity to meet people. And now that I'm retired and don't and not having to go downtown as often as I used to, and don't have the occasion, in other words, to meet as many people, maybe that's why I haven't have started to wonder if the town isn't as friendly as it used to be, or if it's just because I don't get downtown as much. I definitely haven't met 15 new people in Watrous in the last 10 years. And I think that's something.
I think it's a sign of the times, just people are busy
Maybe-
and,
Maybe they see that big boot I have to wear because of my ulcerated diabetic ulcer that takes so long to heal up. Maybe people are afraid they don't want to catch, they don't want to catch diabetic ulcer from me. But that's the way it seems anyway, lately.
so how long did you stay in the hotel business?
Well, in the family, 22 years. I'm
So who would you have bought the hotel from? And who would you have sold it to?
this house.
The hotel. The
Well,
Manitou
that hotel was built in 1907, like they started building it in 1907. And it was actually finished by the beginning of 1908. And I knew the man that built it. And he, because he only stayed here a few years, I didn't know him then, but he's a guy that built it. He'd come up here from Minnesota, I think. And anyway, he moved over to Humboldt, a town twice as big, you see, and it wasn't going to be a big city like Watrous was going to be in 10 years. So he moved over there, and he built a hotel over there. He sold this one to, I think, Mrs. MacArthur owned it next, and owned it for several years. And I don't know what Mr. MacArthur did. I've never ever heard or knew, but she ran it for several years, and she wasn't, she maybe was married, and maybe her husband stayed in Winnipeg for some reason or another. But then there was, when she passed away, she passed it on. She didn't have any family. She passed it on to her son, Jim Walmsley. Now we were getting into talking about years. I don't know how many years Jim Walmsley owned it, but I would say likely 10, give or take a couple of years. Like he was in, well, during the war, when we had a reserve army in town, every big town had a big reserve army. He was, I remember watching him march around the main street with the big group doing their drill during the war years. And Jim Walmsley owned it, like I say, and he had a daughter by the name of, I didn't know you were going to ask me all these tough questions.
I'm sorry, but
Doreen
That's
Walmsley.
okay.
And she was in my grade over in the high school. So anyway, when he died, then they sold it to, he sold it to Archie Niven, a Jewish fellow from Winnipeg, and he had it only for a couple of years. And I used to, he looked like a, almost not a hood, you know, but anyway, for instance, do you know Jimmy Cagney from the movies?
yes.
See Jimmy Cagney with his raincoat collar pulled up, you know, and a hat down over his eyes about like this. And I'd see him once in a while heading down to the next corner for the mail, or else going back to the hotel. And I'd say that guy should take the part of Jimmy Cagney in a movie sometime. Anyway, that was Archie Niven. So Archie Niven and his wife Lola, they ran it for just 2 years. And that's who we bought it from in the end of 1945. Yeah, that's who we bought it from. And
And then how many years did you run it?
Pardon me?
How many years did you run the hotel?
Yeah, 22. And I wasn't there all of that time. For instance, my dad was, Jack was, and Bill was there, except when he got into contracting, he was away quite a bit in town. But he would still come back in the evening and work in the hotel, be the second person looking after the bar. Myself, I had interests, a big investment in it right from the start of $1,000. I'm trying to remember, was that 1,000 or was it 5,000? No, at 27 years old, I don't think I'd have 5,000 saved up. I think it was just 1,000. Anyway, whatever I had in there, I don't even remember if I got it back or not. But that's a long time ago to try to figure it out. But when I finished school, then I started work around the hotel, just helping out and tell my mom to go home, not watch, because in those days you had to have somebody on the desk continually, because it was 37 rooms for rent, and the place we always considered it was 3/4 full, and there was only about 5 people that had steady rooms, so there was about 20 rooms to let out each day to one night or 2-night stays. So there had to be somebody at the desk all the time. So I'd go down after school and tell my mom to go home. I'll stay till supper time, look after the desk. And I'd do stuff like that. And then when I got to be 21, then I could work in the bar. So I started out, I was serving and working in the bar. And in 1952, this crew moved into town, the United Geophysical Seismograph crew, searching for oil exploration. And so they were a friendly bunch, and about half of that crew would come into the bar to have a Coke or something before they go home for supper. So I'd serve them, and they said, "Shucks, why don't you join our crew? Come on out. We have a ball. We're out in the country and we get lots of fresh air." And I said, "It sounds like a good idea," because this was June, and July was coming. It would be real hot. It would be nice, maybe nicer to be staying inside. But anyway, in June of '52, I went on to that crew. And I stayed in that oil exploration for about 7.5 years. I moved all over, all in Western Canada, always in big towns, you see. You always moved into towns where there was a couple or 3 good restaurants and 2 or 3 good hotels, and that's where we would be stationed, because we would be on an average of 4 months in each town. We moved from Watrous to Bigger, and from Bigger to Rosetown. After Rosetown, we went back to Bigger. Then we moved up to Innisfail, Alberta, and then away down to Cardston, Alberta, then over to Estevan, back over to, what do you call that place, Assiniboia, and then up to Alsace, and then Fort St. John, and then Fort St. John, and I guess we worked, that was another thing, I was always going to do that. We would write down all the towns I went to during that time. Then we moved down to, back to Bigger. We went to Bigger 3 times. Then we went over to Foam Lake, and then we moved from Foam Lake to Swift Current, and that's 59. So then I quit, and as a matter of fact, I would have gone to Tehran. They wanted to form a new crew to go to Tehran. They knew there was going to be lots of oil in Tehran and Iran, and so I volunteered. Sure, I said I'll go to Tehran. or Iran. Tehran is where I was supposed to land at first. So I was supposed to go over there, and it was going to be for quite a bit of extra money too. And I'll be doggone if, like they sent me to St. Belcher Hospital in Calgary. I had all my shots, and I was already, I even had the letter saying when I was to report at the airport for leaving. And I came home on a holiday before I would be taken off. And my mother was quite sick that fall. And so I said, no, I don't know if I want to go. And so I went to the doctor, and I asked him how my mother was. I said I was supposed to go to Iran, and he said, well, if you go for the 2-year contract, which it says, you won't see your mom again. So I said, well, I don't think I'll go to Iran. Will you write me a letter saying that? And Heseltine says, you bet. So he just had the girl type out a short letter, saying that why I changed my mind, and I didn't have to go to Iran. And then we found out that the crew that we had is stationed in Swift Current. We were to go back in June after the road bans were all lifted and start work again. They folded that crew up, and I would have had to go to Alaska. So I thought, geez, that's just about as bad as going to Iran. So I said, this is it. So that's why I quit the oil fields. So I came back to Watrous, and then I worked for 61 right up till 67 when we sold the hotel. And then right away after that, I went to work at the railroad and worked 22 years there.
What
And
did you do? What was your job on the railroad?
it was crew calling. They call it a yard clerk, but in Watrous you had to be a yard clerk and a crew caller too, because they don't have the two separate. In the city and places where the little bit larger railroad towns like Melville and bigger, they have a yard clerk, keeps track of all the box cars that are in your yard, and call all the crews as their turn comes up to go out on the next train that's due to go out. And in the towns, in those bigger towns, bigger divisional posts, they have a separate person to do a yard clerking and a separate person to do crew calling. But in a smaller divisional point like Watrous, we had to be a crew clerk and a yard clerk as well. But then the railroad, as they've been doing for years and years and years, kept cutting down. So pretty soon they canceled that job altogether. Didn't have a yard clerk and didn't have a crew clerk, yet the trains were still changing crews here. So the reason that they had people to do that, they picked on the people that were working in the hostel. We had a 72-man hostel here, and had to call people and tell different crews as they slept, wake them up, tell them their train is due in 2 hours, they have to be up and out and go to the station and get their orders and be ready to go at such and such a time. Those are the people that had to do the crew clerk work from then on. And that was a kick in the pants too, because it's plain common sense would tell you at least those people should have got a raise, but no, you you did the work, same as laboring wages, as just looking after a hostel, that's all you get. And whether you were calling crews or even a little bit of yard clerk thrown in, the wages didn't change. So the railroad doesn't treat all of their people exactly fairly either. So I worked at that rate up until 94. So I'll soon have, gee, maybe I've got over 20 years retirement in already. Anyway, I haven't been keeping very close track. And I've got a poor memory, and
I think you've
I
got a
am
great
very shy.
memory.
I don't talk to people very well.
Can I just change back to your dad and what sort of work he did before you bought the Manitou Hotel? What was he doing before then?
Who, my dad?
Your dad, yeah.
Yes. Well, since we're going to go over that, let me just get the page, and I'll likely remember most of it. But just since you asked it, and we went over him once there, I'll get the page on that very thing.
Because I'm realising he had some
Because it is
connections
mentioned
with
in there.
Manitou Beach.
Pardon?
I'm realising he had some connections with Manitou Beach.
Oh, there was a few connections with that too. Well, as a matter of fact, there's a couple of connections right here. Okay, my dad, you said. Oh. You were wondering what he did before he went into the hotel business.
Yes.
Okay, if we do the whole thing, it says here, Alvin Burke was born in 1888 in Garfield, North Dakota, USA. He left his hometown of Park River, North Dakota in December of 1907 at the age of 19. He first arrived at Swift Current, remaining there for 2 months, employed with the Great West Implement Company, the largest concern of its kind in Western Canada. He took a freight, and then he took a freight to Hanley, where he met John Doyle from Little Manitou District. John offered Alvin, that was my dad, a ride, though they did walk behind the sleigh loaded with supplies. Alvin finally arrived at Mandel in 1908 because he only stayed in Swift Current 2 months. Alvin homesteaded on, and then it gives the number of you're not interested in that,
Oh, yes, we
where
are.
he homed, anyway, Southwest 23125, which he owned until his death in 1963. The land was then sold to Delmer Ernst. In 1911, Al was appointed International Harvester Dealer Company in Watrous, a position he held until 1922. So that he was the dealer for 11 years then. Following this, Alvin went into the grain buying in Watrous and Beaufield and Amazon. And the reason in all of those different towns, the company he was working for in Watrous, Northern Elevator, that company sold most of their elevators. So sold that elevator to Alberta Pacific here in Watrous, and so they moved that elevator down there and had two elevators together. And so at that time, to work for that Alberta Pacific, then he had to move to Beaufield, which is a town away out south of Kindersley. So he had to work over there for 2 years before he could get an elevator close to Watrous. So that's why he came to Amazon, and then he worked there until we bought the hotel, you see. Then the 30s came along, and there was very little grain to buy. To supplement his income, Alvin was engaged as chief of police at Manitou Beach for several seasons. During this time, he was also served on the Manitou Beach Council. And there's some more over there. And December of 1945, Alvin and Laura, that's my mom and dad, and their three boys, Bill, Jack, and Homer, formed a partnership and purchased the Manitou Hotel, which they operated until November 1967. Alvin was a leader in many community organizations. He was a Rotarian, Independent Order of Oddfellows, and a member of the original Watrous Citizens Band. Like to start the first band up, he was in the first band they started. Always was in the band, and remained a long-time member. Always interested in sports activities. Alvin was an active curler for many, many years. Alvin passed away in 1963 at the age of 75. Alvin married Laura Jameson. He's the fellow who came up from way down there to Watrous. And in Watrous he married Laura Jameson in Watrous in 1919. She was born in Wolseley in 1897. She was the daughter of William Jameson, the CNR foreman in Watrous, who had moved